Good day, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this technical assistance session related to the ESSER program monitoring process with special emphasis on the self-assessment that you just received. My name is Dr. Otis Reed Jr., and I am an education associate in the Office of Emergency Programs at the State Department of Education, the South Carolina Department of Education. If you have any questions for us related to ESSER program monitoring or the self-assessment, feel free to reach out to us at the email address listed there on the screen, scsr@ed.sc.gov. Here is a copy of the uniform guidance that requires the State Department of Education to perform fiscal and programmatic monitoring of your ESSER activities. For the purpose of this presentation and for the purpose of the monitoring process that I will describe here, we are solely focused on the programmatic monitoring process. And here is an outline of some important dates as it relates to the program monitoring process for this year. Please keep in mind that as the need arises, these dates are subject to change. And now we'll get into the specifics about the self-assessment. Here are some general guidelines for completing the self-assessment. The LEA will use rubrics to assess the accuracy and thoroughness of responses on the self-assessment. You did that last year. For those of you who are familiar with the process, you used those rubrics last year, and we will use them again this year. Anytime there are any insufficient details and unanswered questions, it may lead to further verification in advanced phases of the monitoring process. And while this is a self-assessment, your responses will be reviewed for accuracy based on spending plans that you have in use through June 30th, 2023. On this version of the self-assessment, we have a save and resume feature that you may use throughout the self-assessment. If you need to save your work and come back and work on it a little bit later, you may do that for your convenience. Also, when you submit the self-assessment, a copy will be emailed to the ESSER point of contact for your district. Here are some terms that we feel we should define for you so that you can be successful in the completion of your self-assessment. The first term is planned activities, which consist of all implemented and unimplemented activities identified on your current spending plan through the ARP ESSER funding period ranging from March 24th, 2021 through September 30th, 2024. When we talk about implemented activities, this is what we mean. Your plans are in motion and the process has been started. The LEA is working toward completion of the project deadline. Completed programs count as implemented programs. However, implemented programs are not always complete, and that is okay. We're not looking for all programs to be complete, and you're not being assessed based on completed programs. You are assessed based on your implemented program. If the activity began with ESSER 1 or ESSER 2 and is continuing through the ARP ESSER funding period, then it should be counted as an implemented activity for ARP ESSER. Your rate of implementation is a percentage that is calculated for measuring your advancement toward achieving full implementation of your planned activities by the project deadline. The rate of implementation is determined by dividing the number of planned activities that are presently implemented by the total number of planned activities in the category. The level of implementation is a rubric score that ranges from 0 to 5 that is achieved based on quantitative data and is determined by the LEA's rate of implementation. Your projected completion date is the estimated date on which all planned activities from the category will be completed and all funds allocated to the category will be spent. The ultimate spending deadline for all activities is September 30th, 2024. However, we invite you to give us your estimated deadline for your activities, which may be before September 30th, 2024. So some of you may be wondering, how do I determine which spending plan that I will use to complete the self-assessment? Well, here are some guidelines for that. We are conducting this monitoring based on the 2022-2023 fiscal year, which means you should use the approved spending plan that was in place through June 30th, 2023. Examples of what this means is if you have not submitted any amendments to your ARP ESSER, or excuse me, for ARP ESSER, you should use the spending plan that was approved at the beginning of the funding period. If you submitted an amendment at any point before June 30th, you should use the most up-to-date version. And here we have a more specific example that if you submitted an amendment on November 6, 2022, and then another one on June 8, 2023, you would use the June 8th spending plan because that's your most recently approved plan. Any amendments approved after June 30th should not be used for the purpose of this self-assessment. Please use the spending plan that was in place up to June 30th, 2023. So the first section of the self-assessment deals with activities to address learning loss. We all know that as a requirement of ARP ESSER, 20% of your budget had to be set aside to address learning loss, and that's learning loss in the area of English language arts, mathematics, social emotional learning, and other activities that you felt that you needed to include within that 20% budget. So we ask you to look at the rubric to ensure that you can give us your best response and so that you will be able to score yourself a 2. However, if you feel like you need to score less than a 2, please be open and transparent about that. But this is your opportunity to give yourself the best possible score based on the responses that you give us. Below the rubric is a spot where you will enter your 20% set aside budget. So please enter that budget there. And on the right side of the screen, here are the questions that you will be asked to answer. The first question asks you to describe the processes that you have in place to address learning loss in the area of English language arts. And again, you will do that for math, social emotional learning, and other activities. And then we're asking you to give us your plan for measuring the effectiveness of those programs to address learning loss. And then after you have answered those questions in a very thorough and accurate manner, you are allowed to give us, or you're invited to give us, a score for your responses. And hopefully you will feel confident enough to give us a score of 2. The next section deals with activities for other ARP ESSER funds. Here we have a rubric again for this section. This rubric is a little different. It ranges with scores from 0 to 5. And on the right side of the screen, you see an example of a question in that section. And this question deals with coordination, preparedness, and response efforts. And the question simply asks, did the LEA allocate funds for coordination, preparedness, and response efforts? If your answer is no to that question, then you will not have any more questions related to coordination, preparedness, and response efforts. However, if your answer is yes, then there will be some follow-up questions, and those are listed here. First, we're asking for your budgeted amount that you have allocated for this area, coordination, preparedness, and response efforts. Then we ask you to list all of your planned activities for this category. And we're asking this time that you give us a bulleted list. On the last self-assessment, we did not ask for a bulleted or numbered list. You gave us your responses in paragraph form. However, this time, to maintain accuracy, we're asking that you give us a bulleted or numbered list of all of your planned activities. And then the next question asks you to give us a bulleted or numbered list of all of your implemented activities. And then you will take both of those responses to calculate your rate of implementation. You will take your number of implemented activities and divide it by the total number of planned activities, and you will get your percentage. We ask that you round to the nearest percent. There's a drop-down menu there for your rate of implementation. So select the one that applies to you, and then you will use the next drop-down menu to give us your level of implementation, which is your rubric score, which in this case ranges from 0 to 5. Then you will give us your projected completion date. And again, there are drop-down menus for you to select the appropriate date for your projected completion. And then we ask about you measuring the effectiveness of these activities and then explaining to us how you do that. Here is an example of how to calculate the rate of implementation. As you see here in this example, dealing with educational technology, there are 3 activities listed. They are bulleted. And then when we ask how many are implemented, there's another bulleted list of the activities that are implemented. So as we can see here, 2 activities are implemented out of 3 planned activities. So you take that 2 divided by 3, and your percent is a 67%, rounded to the nearest percent. Looking at the rubric that we just discussed, that 67% falls under a rubric score of 3. So you will select 3 as your rubric score. And the following section deals with the local educational agency information. The rubric is listed on the left side of the slide. Your scores range from 0 to 2. Remember, you have an opportunity to give yourself the highest possible score by giving us your most thorough and precise answers. On the right side, you see an example of a question from this section. And the question says, does the LEA have a strategy to ensure sustainability of ESSER-funded activities? So this section is a little different because you may answer yes or no, and you may still have follow-up questions as a result of either answer. So we ask that you take the time to give us the answer that best suits your district, and give us the answer that will allow you to give yourself a rubric score of 2. Because once you give us your answer, then we're asking you to explain your plan for sustainability. And we know that different districts are at different points of planning efforts for sustainability. Please note that that is something that we all will be asked to do in the very near future. So now may be a good time to begin those discussions surrounding sustainability. And the following section deals with strengths and weaknesses. So we're asking you to give us a little more information about your district by identifying what's working well for you as it relates to your ESSER programs, and also take some time to describe for us the challenges that you face in implementing your ESSER programs. We all face challenges at one point or another, so we just ask that you be open and honest and thorough about the strengths and weaknesses that you face in your district concerning your ESSER programs. Remember, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, there is the save and resume feature. It is available throughout the self-assessment. Please use it as you need to. We know that you are busy and you have lots going on, especially this time of year as we begin the school year. So feel free to save and resume your work so that you can give us the best possible responses. Also, I want to emphasize that you can ask for technical assistance throughout the self-assessment. If you need help from us in the implementation of your programs, we ask that you simply let us know, and we will do our best to provide you the help that you need. So please don't be ashamed about asking for technical assistance. We're here to provide that for you. When you are successful, we are successful, and we want the entire state of South Carolina to be successful in the implementation of our ESSER programs. When you finally hit that submit button, you will get this message thanking you for your submission and reminding you that the contact person for your district will receive confirmation of the submission, and they will also get a copy of the responses that they submitted to us. So you will always have that for your records. It also reminds you that you can contact us at any time with any questions or concerns you may have. Contact us at scsr@ed.sc.gov. Again, I thank you for tuning in to this session. Best wishes in the completion of your self-assessment. Best wishes in your implementation of your ESSER programs, and most importantly, best wishes for a prosperous and productive school year. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.